Ladies and gentlemen, it is time. We have arrived. The fantasy playoffs are here, and I'm bringing you over 10 players that are going to win you a fantasy championship this year. I'm going to go through every position, so check out the time code, even kickers and defenses as well at the end. Let's start off with the running back position. The first guy that I think is going to lead you to a fantasy championship is James Conner. All right, James Conner this year is the RB12 overall, okay, in scoring, averaging just under 15 points per game, hovering right around that 14.9 points per game mark. I mean, he has the third best strength of schedule in the playoffs. By the way, if you look at these screenshots, this is all a big thanks to RotoWire, where we're sourcing this information from, but they have the third best matchup in the playoffs. You know, they are firing on all cylinders. James Conner here in week 14 versus the Seahawks, finds his form again after a couple rough outings, over 22 PPR points, over 90 rushing yards, obviously gets the work in the air as well and gets the receiving touchdown. And he has such a good upcoming schedule. His next three matchups in the playoffs, all right, week 15, New England, week 16, Carolina. Those are two top 8 matchups, specifically Carolina, the best matchup for your running back. And then in week 17, he faces the Los Angeles Rams. And if we go back to week number 2, well, he faced the Rams in that week as well. Remember, he had over 122 rushing yards. He had over 19 PPR points. So he is set up to be a true league winner. Hopefully you went out and traded for him when we suggested to earlier in the year. Okay, at number 2, in case he's still out there on the waiver wire, I told you to pick him up last week in the waiver video. There won't be a waiver video this week. There's just not that much action outside the Niners running backs. But Sincere McCormick. All right, if he's out there, this is your last shot because he has legitimate league winning upside. And don't forget last year, guys, Zamir White went on a little 4-game spurt where he kind of helped people get into the playoffs and win in the playoffs. Why not Sincere this year? You know, he really just started getting his opportunities in week 12 versus Denver. He only played 10% of the snaps, had 5 carries, over 6.5 yards per carry. Then versus Kansas City in week 13, he has 12 attempts, 64 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. Then in between this week, before, week 14, the coaching staff raves about him, talking about how they want to up his usage. And then here in week 14 versus Tampa Bay, he has 15 carries, over 5 yards per clip. He has 3 targets, 18 total opportunities, and they have talked about how much they loved him. They've been really hoping for someone to step up in the way that Sincere has. And here's the best part. He has the 6th best strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs, according to RotoWire. Let's look at his 3 matchups. All right, week 15, Atlanta. All right, Atlanta's, not a great matchup, not terrible. But look at week 16 and 17, guys. In deeper formats, he has the Jags, the 3rd best matchup for your running back. The Saints in championship week, the 4th best matchup for your running back. I mean, this is potentially one of those guys who kind of comes out of the woodworks out of nowhere and wins people a fantasy championship. You have this guy on the opposite side of your matchup and you're thinking, oh, I'm good to go. It's Sincere McCormick. Next minute, this guy becomes the workhorse for them, has great matchups ahead of him, and, the rest could be history. It truly could. So Sincere McCormick, definitely a name to keep your eye on, I guess, right? All right, the third name that I believe is going to win some championships, David Montgomery. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs, but David Montgomery as well. So this year, David Montgomery is currently your RB8 overall, averaging 16.5 points per game, has 12 rushing touchdowns so far this year. And he's been so good, so effective, so efficient, just that bruiser, in this backfield. And here's the good news for these Lions running backs, all right? They have the 2nd best strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs. Only the Jets running backs have a better strength of schedule in the playoffs. I don't know how much you can trust Breece Hall right now, but we definitely trust these running backs. In week 15, David Montgomery gets Buffalo, the 2nd best matchup for your running back. In week 16, he gets Chicago, which is middle of the pack. And then in week 17, he gets San Francisco, which is a top 10 matchup at the time of recording this video. So, yeah, guys, the entire offense is built around the run game. These 2 running backs are dominating for fantasy. They're going to win people some championships. The 4th running back room I want to talk about here is Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. There's a very good chance that Bucky Irving doesn't play this week because of an injury. So if you guys are out there and you have Rachaad White, you can fire him up with confidence in the playoffs as long as Bucky isn't playing. Now, if Bucky's out there, I think we all agree he's the number 1 guy for them. But here's the deal. They have the 5th best strength of schedule in the playoffs. All right, again, 5th best. And here are the matchups that they have. In week 15 and 16, not the best matchups. Dallas was a team that you could really beat, but they've turned it around. But here's where it's important. In week 17, with all the marbles on the line, you've got the Carolina Panthers, the best matchup in fantasy football. And yes, obviously Bucky Irving took over. Like, he was the guy, right? Back-to-back weeks over 27 PPR points, 17 PPR points a week before, career high in usage and touches, in week 13, but goes down with the injury. And then Rachaad White steps in, has 20 total touches, 17 carries, 3 targets, almost 25 PPR points, touchdown on the ground and through the air. We know that these guys kind of funnel all their work through the running backs. So whoever's a starter, you can start them with confidence. All right, moving on to the wide receiver position. Let's start off with Jakobi Meyers, another name that I begged you to go out and buy for the playoffs. Jakobi Meyers has been really, really sneaky this year. I mean, so far the wide receiver 23 on the season, he's been super reliable. I mean, if you look from like week 5 onwards or week 3 onwards, ever since Devontae Adams kind of left this team, he's been so consistent. He's been a top 15 wide receiver for fantasy football, and they have the best strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs. I know it's probably Desmond Ridder, but I'm not talking to people in 18 leagues and 10-team leagues. I'm talking to people out there who need that last flex spot in your 12 or your 14 or your 16 team leagues. Jakobi Meyers is perfect, man. Best matchups in the playoffs. Here he has Atlanta and Jacksonville, weeks 15 and 16, 2 top 5 matchups for your wide receiver. And then in week 17, the New Orleans Saints, who outside of this week versus the Giants have been giving up huge points to wide receivers in the last 5 weeks. So I think Jakobi Meyers, man, he could be sneaky. Again, one of those names you could see on the opposite side, of your matchup and think, all right, I'm good to go. Ultimately for him just to, be the reason you're out of the playoffs. All right, second name, which might be a surprise, Adam Thielen. All right, Adam Thielen has had a rough year, all right? You remember, the first 3 weeks, it wasn't at all what we thought it would be. Remember, Deontay Johnson was on this team, and he was the clear number 1 target. And then Adam Thielen goes on the IR with that injury. Now, he comes back, and since week 13, he's averaging 10.5 targets, over 10 per game. He's averaging about 100 yards per game, and over 19 PPR points in his last 2 performances. We've also seen Bryce Young really start to break out, really find his own in the NFL. Panthers had the 11th best strength of schedule in the playoffs. Here's what they have, right? In week 15, Dallas, a beatable team through the air. In week 16, Arizona, middle of the pack. And in championship week, they have the Tampa Bay Bucks, the best matchup for your wide receiver. Adam Thielen, man, could go from waiver wire in some small leagues to league winner. It's a true possibility. The third player I think could be a league winner at wide receiver is DJ Moore. Yes, that is right. DJ Moore, the wide receiver 15 overall in fantasy football this year. And ever since we saw the firing of Shane Waldron, he has been much, much better, right? Over 7 targets in every single game. Yes, they just faced the San Francisco 49ers. That didn't work out so well. I hear you. But here's the good news. They have the 3rd best strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs. Only the Giants and Raiders have a better strength of schedule. Here's what DJ Moore faces in the playoffs. Minnesota in week 15, 2nd best matchup for your wide receiver. Then Detroit in week 16, divisional game, all cards on the table. And then in week 17, the Seattle Seahawks, a top 10 matchup for your wide receiver. Get ready for DJ Moore to win you some leagues. All right, how about Malik the Freak Neighbors? Look, I get it. Last week was not good at all. I mean, there's no way to cookie cut this, all right? But here's the good news. He was a little bit limited, all right? He had that hip injury and that groin injury, and we'll have to monitor that, but we already were told that they won't shut him down this year. But the good news is he gets a high amount of targets, and this team is consistently down. They're going to consistently need to target Malik Neighbors. And he has the 2nd best strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs, like we mentioned before. But the first 2 weeks in particular are juicy. Baltimore, top 7 matchup. Atlanta, top 5 matchup. And then Indianapolis in week 17, kind of middle of the pack type of matchup there. But man, if we get Tommy Cutlets back there, I think we could have some legit league winning upside here with Malik Neighbors, and at least you'll have a solid floor. All right, the 5th wide receiver that I believe could be a league winner is Courtland Sutton. He has been on an absolute tear. I mean, if you look from week 8 onwards, guys, he has been a monster. 17 points, 23, 19, 14, 29, 16. He's been so consistent, getting so many targets, averaging about 10 targets per game. The red zone threat. He's a wide receiver 8 overall this year so far, coming off the bye week. Again, 7th best matchups. In the playoffs, he has Indianapolis and the Chargers the first 2 weeks, middle of the pack, but we know Bo Nix likes to throw. And then in week 17, he has the Bengals, who are definitely going to be able to score, and they're the 3rd best matchup for your wide receiver. So expect some juicy matchups for Courtland Sutton when it all matters. All right, moving on to the tight end position. The number 1 tight end for me that I think could be a league winner this year is David Njoku. All right, David Njoku this year It has been a really up and down season, a tale of two halves. All right, let's remember Deshaun Watson era. Okay, well, Deshaun Watson era, he had 5 targets, 8 points, 2 points, 8 points. All right, and then Deshaun Watson goes down with an injury and he becomes a superstar in fantasy football. When we got to finally see Jameis Winston in there, a 23-point performance, 17, 19, 26, 17, and the targets are through the roof. This is what you would dream of for your fantasy tight end. Guys, we're talking about a player that missed 3 weeks, had the worst quarterback play in the league, and is still the tight end 11 despite that, with Jameis Winston kind of showing up and balling out. And you know he's a red zone threat. He has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, and he has the second best strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs. So he's got Kansas City in week 15. He's got Cincinnati, the best matchup in week 16, and in week 17, Miami, which is a top 10 matchup for your tight ends. And Njoku, man, I do not want to see him when I'm facing my matchups in the fantasy playoffs. I don't want to see this man. All right, the second tight end that I think could be a league winner, he's been a little up and down recently, but that's TJ Hawkinson. You know, he came back in week 9 from that torn ACL last year. You know, only played about 45 to 50% of the snaps in the first 3 weeks. Now he's up there in the mid 60s. He'll get up there into the 80s and 90s soon. And the target share is there. It's reliable, you know, on a good offense. And the best part is they have the 4th best strength of schedule in the playoffs. All right, so he's got Chicago, a top 12 matchup in week 15, then top 10 matchups in week 16 and 17 in Seattle and Green Bay. He is set to smash when it matters the most. And the third tight end, this might be a little obvious, so we might not spend too much time. Trey McBride, you know how good Trey McBride's been this year, but he has the 5th best strength of schedule in the playoffs, all right? And he has New England in week 15, smash. Carolina in week 16, smash. He has the Rams in week 17, no high scoring game. He should smash. Remember in week 2, he faced the Rams. He had 6 targets for 67 yards, over 18 points. That was his only touchdown on the year where he kind of recovered that fumble for a touchdown. But the target share is insane in these last 3 weeks, guys. This is exactly what you want to see from your tight end heading into the playoffs. Averaging about 13.5 targets per game, somewhere around there. You know, averaging almost 100 yards per game. This is exactly what you want to see heading into the playoffs. All right, let's talk about quarterbacks. All right, let's talk quarterbacks here. Brother Bo Nix, another guy I encourage you to go trade for him. People thought I was crazy. All right, this was like 4 or 5 weeks ago. People thought I was insane. But he's been so good. The quarterback's 7 on the season. You know, really, since week 3 onwards, he's completely turned it around. He's a legit, as a Washington fan, I have to admit this, a legit rookie of the year candidate. And the good news for him is the schedule gets even easier in the playoffs. He has the 6th easiest schedule for quarterbacks. He has Indianapolis and the Chargers. And then after that, Cincinnati in championship week. Cincinnati, the 3rd best matchup for your quarterback. All right. The number 2 quarterback that I think could win leagues this year, that is let him bake, Baker Mayfield. All right, Baker Mayfield's a quarterback 6 overall. For pretty much every league, he was a pickup off the waiver wire, and he's been a consistent start every single week. Even without Chris Godwin, he's figured out a way to figure it out. You know, 7th best matchups for the rest of the season. All right, he's got the Chargers in week 15, but in week 16 and 17, all right, the semifinals and the finals for your fantasy playoffs. Top 10 matchups in Dallas and Carolina. This guy could be legit the reason you win your playoffs. All right, especially in 6-point passing touchdowns leagues. All right, third quarterback that I think could win leagues, this is Kyler Murray. Yes, I know he's been up and down. You know, he didn't have the best day versus Seattle, but still managed to get somewhere around 20 points. Those two interceptions really hurt him. But he has a top 10 schedule rest of season in the playoffs. He's got New England and Carolina, both top 10 matchups in week 15 and 16. And then in week 17, he has the Rams. And let me remind you guys, in week 2 versus the Rams, he had over 28 points, 3 passing touchdowns, over 59 rushing yards, and he just had an incredible week. So don't sleep on Kyler Murray. All right, if you're looking to pick up some defenses, well, this is the portion of the video for you. The number 1 defense for me in the fantasy playoffs has to be the Indianapolis Colts. If you can squeak by week 15, I think you're in the clear. All right, week 15 versus Denver, they're middle of the pack, but week 16 and 17, where the money is made, there might not be a better defense out there. Tennessee, top 8 matchup. The Giants, with the playoffs, your championship on the line, the best matchup for your fantasy defense. All right, how about the Arizona Cardinals? I know they just got pummeled, but they've been a really good defense for most of the year. In week 15, maybe go pick them up right now. They face the New England Patriots. 3rd best matchup for your defense. Then Carolina, kind of middle of the pack. And then in week 17, if you'd like to pivot off them, I get that. They face the Rams. You know, that's a more difficult matchup. I wouldn't blame if you wanted to do that. All right, and I'm also going to give you 3 kickers here to end the video. Number 1, Jake Moody. Sixth best matchup for kickers rest of season. He's got 2 top 5 matchups in week 15 and 16. And then week 17 is kind of, you can look for alternate options versus Detroit. Second kicker, I think you should go pick up if he's available, Chase McLaughlin, a top 10 matchup. All right, so week 15 versus the Chargers, tough. They give up the fewest points in the NFL. But in week 16 and 17, if you're out there and you have a bye in the playoffs, week 16 and 17, there's probably not a better kicker out there than Chase McLaughlin. Top 6 matchups in the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. And at number 3, Young Ho Koo, all right, who has the best matchup in week 1 of the fantasy playoffs with the Las Vegas Raiders, and then middle of the pack against the Giants. And you might want to pivot off of him against the Commanders in week 17. But I appreciate y'all for watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. There will be no waiver wire video this week. There just wasn't a lot to talk about. If you want to go pick up, the newest 49ers running back, because Isaac Herendo, if by the time you're watching this, is going to miss a week, maybe. I don't know that. But if he does, you can go do that, spot start that player. But outside of that, there wasn't really anyone that I felt was worth, diving into that I hadn't already talked about last week. I appreciate y'all for watching the video. Again, hit that like button to show some love. Hey, if you have a tough decision this week in the playoffs and you want to ask me a fantasy question, check out the pinned comment. You can reach me on our website at any time, and I'll give you a reply over there. And if you don't have a free account on the Flock site just yet, while you're over there, sign up with the promo code LAND, LAND, and you'll get access to some free tools like the My Team feature, the expert consensus rankings, and the trade calculator. All as a thank you for using our promo code. Let's go win some fantasy championships, baby. I'm ready for it. You? Come on, let's do it. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.